I wanted to talk about success. The media has glamorized results, but they conceal what the reality of that success really looks like. The demons that come along with the wealth and the recognition and the influence that and the power that we gain, what it takes for that success to happen, sometimes it isn't something that we even want. One of the bigger things is skill sets. Most successful people are prominent and affluent in a particular skill set, a skill set that everyone doesn't have. Most people crave inspiration from the performance of everything, right? Not necessarily the truth of everything. And I think social media has displayed that for us. The honest truth is you can't duplicate someone's success story without duplicating the process that they went through. And if they aren't telling you the truth, you don't know what that process is. To be successful or to learn from someone's success, it takes more than just knowing the highlight or the cliff notes that they're showing us or telling us. It takes us knowing, man, what's the real truth behind what it is that you did to get to this level of success. Welcome to the new episode of the Miles High Podcast. This is Miles Jr. I'm your host, and as always, the vision and goal of this podcast is to entertain, educate, and elevate you miles high above your fears, your doubts, and any limitations that you may think exist, always knowing that those limitations only exist in your mind. All right, so for today's podcast, I first of all want to say that this episode is sponsored by the Monroe Institute of Leadership. It is our leadership training institute within our brand. And it is the vehicle that we use to do leadership and personal training. If you haven't heard about the institute as yet, I invite you to check out the institute's website. It's themill.org. We recently released our micro learning and mini courses, in addition to the core courses that we have had on stream for a while now. If you're interested in continued learning, and I'm a true believer that in life, we should continue being developed, continue gaining information, and then gaining an understanding of that information, right? And that's exactly what happens at the Monroe Institute of Leadership. The courses that we have curated and developed are meant to not only build you professionally, but build your personal man as well. And the encouragement is to always and continually work on yourself. I think self-development, personal development should be a top priority throughout our lives. It's a never-ending journey of learning, of development, just to better ourselves, right? Creating greater value for ourselves so that we can have a bigger impact and influence on the worlds around us. So again, if you haven't checked out the website, check out the Monroe Institute of Leadership, themill.org. And sign up for a course today. We're almost coming down to the end of this year. This would be a great time for you to get in and get a head start on your personal development. And you can check out all of the courses that we have available. All right. Okay, so for this episode, I wanted to talk about success, but in particular, the success teachings, right? We all like to hear from and learn from people that are successful. The media has glamorized results or the success results, but they conceal what the reality of that success really looks like, right? Which is the journey. People tend to showcase the majority of times their achievements, but not the sacrifices that they had to make to get that success or to get to that goal that they had set for themselves. people teach success formulas, right? Like if you do this and you do this, you're going to get this, or you're going to get that, or you're going to be able to achieve this. But the truth is, those things worked for them under very specific and particular conditions. The economy might have been in a particular state. That personal lives may have been at a particular point. Just the conditions around them may have been at a point where things were just perfect for those steps to work for them during that time. And a lot of times we hear these advice, we hear these recommendations for us to follow as persons also seeking to be successful. But we don't get the full picture, right? We don't get the entire truth. And that's where the mark is missed most of the time. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were just talking about how, obviously successful people are able to get a lot of influence amongst the persons that they come into contact with, right? Like I said, we all want to be successful, and we love to hear from successful people. But a lot of the times, the message that is shared is the message that people want to hear. Right? People don't really want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear about the length of time that it takes for things to happen, right? For success to be achieved. They don't want to hear about the failures. They don't want to hear about the delays. They just want to hear about the things that worked. Man, how did you do this? How did you get to this point? What did you use? What tools did you use, right? And, one of the bigger things that people tend to forget is skill sets, right? Most successful people are very prominent and affluent in a particular skill set, a skill set that everyone doesn't have, right? So it's easy for them to say, man, you can be successful if you do this and if you do that. But if this and that doesn't fall within our skill sets, then it's going to be a little harder for us, or maybe even impossible for us to be successful. That reminds me of an article that I remember reading, quite a number of years ago. And it was referencing Michael Jordan. He had retired from the NBA at the time, and he was working within his role as owner of the Charlotte Hornets. And you would hear the players say, man, Michael was so hard on us. Like, he would chew us out in practice. And, one of the ways that he would approach I guess his mentorship, if you want to call it that, is really trying to expect, or really not understanding why these players that he oversees or that he mentors, right, that he's impacting, can't do the things that come easy to him. And a lot of successful people are that way, right? Certain things come easy for them because of their skill sets, because of the ability that they have. And they look at persons around them thinking, man, this is too easy for me, so it should be the same for everyone else. And I'm sure we've all done it, right? Where, we have folks that aren't good at math, for example. And, a simple, or what we would determine, at least those who are good at math, would determine is a simple math problem or a math equation. And you are able to answer it swiftly. And, there may be someone else who may take a little more time to get the results or to get the answers to that problem. And, you would look at them and be like, man, why? Like, all you have to do is do this, this, and this, and you're gonna get the results. But we're all wired a bit differently, right? And the struggle that Michael Jordan had was he was a generational talent, right? We haven't seen the type of drive and the type of intensity and the skill sets that Michael displayed in the 90s for quite some time, right? LeBron, I think, has come close. We have a few other players that have come close, but their skill sets are entirely different than what Jordan's own was. And it just shows that success is sort of like a tailored suit, right? It's not the way that certain people achieve success that suit isn't going to fit everyone. And we have to be very cautious of taking those advice points from individuals, right? You understand, you must have an understanding of the fact that, yes, this made you successful. This is why you're successful. But coupled with that is just your natural ability, your natural skill sets, right? The things that come easy to you, the things that you're good at, may not be things that I'm good at, right? I may not be able to see things the way that you see them, or interpret things the way that you interpret them, or anticipate things the way that you're able to anticipate them, because our skill sets are different. So when we're looking at it from that perspective, you should be taking these advice or these pointers with a grain of salt. You're not going to be able to take all of it at one time and use it or apply it to your life, because it's just not, it doesn't work that way. And that's probably why a lot of persons, a lot of us, feel like success isn't working for us, because we listen to all of these successful individuals in different areas of the industry, in different worlds that they are successful in, and we try to emulate and imitate what they're doing, right? They say that if I do these 5 steps, I'm going to be successful. If I do these 5 things, I'm going to achieve a level of success that they've achieved. But again, skill sets, sacrifice, even environment, right? All of that comes into play. And then, honestly, the truth about what people fail at, the delays that they experience, the doubt sometimes even that's set in, right? It just isn't a glamorized talking point that most individuals don't care about. I don't want to hear about the negatives. Just tell me the positives and let me go with that. So a lot of the times that isn't even discussed, right? Isn't even mentioned, and it's a very important part of why success happens. Just using Michael Jordan again as an example. There's a quote that he coined, quite a number of years ago, and it talked about why he's so successful. And it says because he failed a lot more times than he had achieved success or had experienced success. And it's because he was willing to take the opportunity that presented itself, right? He was willing to take that difficult shot, or take the last shot, and put everything on him. A lot of people can't burden that stress, can't take on that added that stress, that anxiety that comes along with it, right? But he possessed a certain set of skills, a certain ability to ignore the noise in the market, as they would say, and be able to channel and have tunnel vision for his focus in order for him to achieve high levels of success, more than he achieved non-success. So environment, skill sets, the sacrifices that we go through, all of that is important. And I think as individuals who learn from others, right, and you gain this information, that has to be an understanding that we take on. Most people crave inspiration from the performance of everything, right? Not necessarily the truth of everything. And I think social media has displayed that for us, right? Social media initially started out as a place of connectivity, right? To keep in touch with friends and family and show them where you're going, where you've been, where you would like to go, the things you're doing, because we were so disconnected in our physical reach, right? That we wanted to stay connected digitally and online. So you had a lot of interactions with friends over these social platforms. But now it's just turned into a stage almost, right? And everyone is performing, right? Everyone is, displaying a level of themselves that may not be true, and most times isn't true, because it's what we think either people want to see, or it's what we want people to assume or to think about us, who are the performers. So the entire world at this point is a stage, and you have to take everything that we see really with a grain of salt, right? Half of it is true, Well, 30% of it is true, 30% of it isn't true, and then 30% just doesn't matter. And I think having that approach with the way that we take in information will allow us to be a bit more level-headed in our expectations, in the desires even that we have, the goals that we set, because there's an understanding there that, man, I'm not going to be able to achieve it the way that that person achieved it, because we're just different environments, different skill sets. Like I said, there's all of these variables that come into play that affect the level of success that we achieve. So if we're trying to do the same thing someone else does in order to achieve the level of success that they achieved, more times than not, we're not going to be able to achieve that level of success, because there's just too many differences involved. And then there's a point where all success isn't above board, right? And I think that's probably one of the more bigger highlights from this conversation. Some people who are successful, they tend to cut corners. They tend to gain their success on deceiving others, and then they tend to gain their success on compromising their integrity, right? And they teach principles that sound pure, but they're never the real reason why the level of success they achieved was achieved, right? So once they achieve the success, they are influential now, right? They have an audience because of this success. And then they tell this audience, man, I'm so successful because I've done these amazing things, right? And I read books every day, or I follow this regimen of discipline that I've put in place. But in all honesty, that's really not the case, right? They, like I said, there's some things that they may have done that just wasn't above board, right? It may have been corrupt. It may have hurt or harmed or, had a negative effect or impact on others. They might have broken the law in some sense. So everyone that's successful, their success, the true way that they achieve that success isn't always known, right? So we don't know the truth, and what they're telling us more times than not are just the cliff notes, right? And the things that sound good, or the things that even we may want to hear, because it's something that we are eagerly desiring to achieve, and we tend to want to do anything that we need to do to achieve it. But, again, the advice that they're giving isn't going to move the needle for us, because a lot of the facts behind that success just isn't being communicated. And that's a very important point when it comes to success, right? Because I like to think of success as there being two types, right? So there's a level of success that people achieve because of it being built off of systems and shortcuts. And then there's that level of success that is achieved that's built off of truth, built off of purpose, built off of being aligned correctly, right? A good analogy to draw off this are the MLM business models, right? The multi-level marketing business models. Now, when I first got introduced to multi-level marketing models, I think I was either a senior in high school or a freshman in college. And I was introduced to, someone that, came across as very successful, wealthy, or, settled in their finances. Let's say that. I can't say that. I mean, because wealth is a relative thing, right? But they had achieved a level of financial success. And they were flaunting things, right? So shiny things, whether it was clothes, cars, jewelry. And they used this as a tactic to gain the attention that they wanted in order for them to pitch this multi-level marketing idea. And I'm sure, if you haven't came across one of these individuals before that introduce you to a product, then tell you, man, to come to this meeting to learn more about it, and you can get involved too, and here's what I've done, and you can achieve it too. And all you need to do to achieve it is, sign up under me, and then you find other individuals that can sign up under you, right? And you're going to be able to, over time, gain a level of success, financial success, because, and they show these charts saying if you have 10 people under you, you get, this amount of residual income. If you have 20 people, it increases to that. And, the numbers compound until it shows that, man, if I just put in a little work and try to get these people to sign up for this organization, I'm going to be, super wealthy. And early on, I started. So I joined. I entered the business, worked or did the things that I was told to do. That they said was proven to work, but it just didn't work for me. And at first, it was like, man, why isn't this working? I'm doing what everyone says, but I'm not seeing, this level of success. But very, very quickly, I started to realize that the type of person that I am, this type of business doesn't work for me. Like that type of business at the most fundamental basis is for persons who are good at sales. You have to be a good salesman. And, we could argue that all aspects of business, all aspects of life, we have to have a sense, a good sense of being able to sell something, right? Sell ourselves, sell our skill sets, sell the things that we can do, things that we're good at. But the level that I felt was needed for, those MLM business models to work, I just didn't have. I wasn't a very outgoing person. I wasn't, especially at that time in my life, interested in engaging with persons on an ongoing and daily basis. So that wouldn't necessarily work for me. And I realized that earlier on, and that's when I said, man, this is a scheme, right? And, the scheme works, or supposedly it worked for others. But one of the things I started to realize is, like, you would hear about these businesses, right? They would be super popular. Everyone would be talking about them. Everyone would be joining and going to the different gatherings and conferences and stuff. And then, maybe a year or two later, it's crickets, right? You don't hear anything. And I always wondered, like, man, why, if these businesses were so successful at the point that I was introduced to them, or at the point that I started to gain an understanding of, their existence, and then a few years later they don't exist, then what does that tell us, right? And that tells us that there is a system that was in place for this short-lived, short-term success to be achieved. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? There's a system, or there's shortcuts that people want to take, right? They don't want to go the long route. They don't want to put the work in. They don't want to put the amount of years in that it takes to become successful to the point that it's lasting, right? And it's able to be reciprocated, not only for us, but for those around us, like family and friends and loved ones. And that's one of the things that I started to recognize, and eventually just was like, man, I'm not wasting my time on these types of businesses anymore, because, it's a system. It's a system that's in place. Now, does that system work for some individuals? I'm sure, there were people that were successful in the business. But I'm sure also a lot of it had to do with persons that were joining the business, paying whatever the fee was to join, and the volume of those fees that came in, right, pushed the business along to a certain point. And then it just died out because, people just stopped joining or stopped contributing, or realized that it wasn't working for them like I did, and decided to do something different. So when we're talking about success and being able to teach success and then achieve the levels of success that we're being taught to achieve, there's a lot of factors that come into place. So, like I said, we all want to talk or hear from successful people, but those persons, we have to ensure that what we're hearing, what we're listening to, and what we might even apply to our lives fits the skill sets and the environment that we live in, right? And I think once we continue to have that mentality, then we can incrementally be able to see levels of success. There's this comparison game that everyone has, right? And back in the 1950s, people always say that, man, life was so much easier back then. Things were cheaper. Life was less involved, right? There was a lot less going on in the worlds that we live in today. But we don't. That's true. I guess that's a factual statement, but I don't think it's the entire truth, right? Because there was a lot other things happening during those times, right? You didn't have as much high levels of the cost of living. Things was a whole lot cheaper. Capitalism wasn't as stringent as strong as it was now, to where everyone is trying to make the large bucks and to get the eyes and to get people to pay attention to them or spend money with them, right? It was simpler back then because people had lower expectations, right? There was no desire to go on a European vacation or have the flashy cars or to live in a big house. Like, people were comfortable and content with the 1-bedroom house, 2-bedroom house, with the picket fence and whatever. But as time progressed, people's desires and expectations grew, and that's why we're now chasing much larger goals, much larger dreams, and it now seems a lot more difficult today than it was back then. But that's because our expectations have changed. So to be successful, or to learn from someone's success, it takes more than just knowing the highlight or the cliff notes that they're showing us or telling us. It takes us knowing, man, what's the real truth behind what it is that you did to get to this level of success. Because the honest truth is, you can't duplicate someone's success story without duplicating the process that they went through. And if they aren't telling you the truth, then you don't know what that process is. So I always say, man, we can't chase performance. We have to chase purpose. We have a lot of performative people that are in front of us, right? And there are some who, let us behind the curtains and allow us to see what both success and failure looks like, what good days and bad days look like. But the majority of them, the more popular ones, you're only hearing what's attractive, right? What's incentivized, what moves the needle from a financial standpoint, and the truth is avoided. But the onus is on us as the consumer, as the listeners, as the learners, to really dictate for ourselves what exactly it is that we want to achieve for ourselves, from the environment that we're in, from the things that we're learning, and essentially doing it our way. So again, don't chase performance, chase purpose. Don't chase trends, chase transformation. Right? That should be the goal of everything. The things that we learn and gain from others, their experiences, their success, it should reflect some sort of transformation within us or around us, right? And if we're not achieving that, then we're not getting the full story, or we don't have the skill sets that they have, or there is just something missing from what it is that we are learning, and we have to find that missing piece. That's the most important thing. And I just want to go on record to say, I'm not saying not to listen to successful people, right? Because like I say, we all want to gain certain levels of knowledge. I try to, be as open to learning from any and everyone, right? Because there are some things that everyone does that is a good lesson, right? Is a good teaching point, is a good skill or key that I can apply to the things that I either am doing or something that I would like to do in the future. But I'm saying we need to make sure that we get the entire story, right? Get the whole truth, because success from an outside perspective looks a certain way, but when you get into the nitty gritty of it, right, and you start to see the truth behind what it takes for that success to happen, sometimes it isn't something that we even want, right? I think of Bob Johnson, right? He was the founder of BET. and he had bought the Charlotte Hornets. He changed the name to the Charlotte Bobcats, and he was the guy that sold the team to Michael Jordan. But there was this book that was released about his life and how he gained the level of success that he gained, and his particular story was intriguing to me because he was this black man from humble beginnings that took over a network, right? And that wasn't something that was common, especially for black people. So that was intriguing to me, and I wanted to learn, man, what did it take? What did he do to achieve that level of success? And as I started to read his story, like, yes, you heard the good things and understood like the path and the journey that he took, but the amount of sacrifices that he had to make, the amount of failures, the amount of detours, he lost his family, he cheated on his wife, just his personal life just started to be affected a whole lot more. And at the end of the day, it's like, man, was it all really worth it, right? Chasing, the goal, chasing this dream, I think is fine. But once this large sums of money become involved, it really brings out the true us that's inside, right? So I think in order for us to achieve good success, right, first of all, we must be grounded in the Word, because it says that that's what God wants to give us, right? God wants to give us success and good success, right? Not the negative aspects or the negative things that come along with the worldly success or the success that comes through systems and shortcuts. And as I read this book, and it's called the $1 billion bet. That's. But I read it. Man, I might have read this when I was a freshman in college, but it was one of the earlier books that really helped me to really understand the difference between good success and bad success, right? And I would encourage you, if you haven't read the book before, pick the book up. There are a lot of good principles in there, but you get to see behind the curtains of a successful life, right? And what it takes and what happens when success is achieved, or what could happen when success is achieved, right? It all depends on the type of character we have, the type of person that we are. And if we're not developing our personal mind to be able to handle the demons that come along with the wealth and the recognition and the influence and the power that we gain with the success, then it's going to have a negative effect on us, right? It's going to corrupt us. And that's also a part of the story that we're not told. Because again, everyone is performative, right? We only want to say what's glorified or what's attractive or what sounds good and what's going to get the clicks and the views and all the things that are determined or deemed successful within this day and time that we live in. But again, the goal or the end result should be for us not to be chasing performance, right? We're really digging in and developing and understanding what our purpose is, and not chasing what's trendy, but just trying to be transformed and to transform those around us. So, I'm not saying don't get that advice or lessons from successful people, but understand that we're not getting or may not be getting the entire story all of the time. So we need to really take heed to that and have a better understanding of what it is that we really want. What do we want to achieve? If we're comparing ourselves or our success to someone else's, maybe what can I pull from them to add to what it is that I'm doing, but not really wanting to imitate or emulate their every move, right? Because we're not going to be in that inner circle where we're going to know exactly how the success for them happened. And a lot of the times it comes with a lot more than we might expect. So the milestone for today, as we close out this episode, is simply this. The problem isn't that success doesn't work, but it's that we are taught to chase the results without the truth about the journey. And that part of the equation is more important than the results themselves. What did it really take to get there? What were my skill sets supposed to be? What did I need as an individual? What sacrifices did I have to make? that truth about the journey is sometimes what we're missing. So it's not that we can't achieve success, but the reason we may not be achieving the success that we think we should be achieving, especially learning these steps from other individuals, is because we're not getting the whole truth. And that's an important part of the equation. So ensure that everything that we're chasing, that we're gaining from others, try to find the truth in it, right? And I'm talking about the journey part of the truth. What did it? As I know what you're telling me, but what did it really take for you to get to this point? And then in turn, what would it take for me to do the same? All right. So just keep that perspective in mind when gaining information and knowledge from others, because again, we're not always going to be told the truth about the journey. All right. So that brings us to the end of this pod. As always, our goal here is to entertain you, educate you, but most importantly, elevate you above all the fears and doubts that you may think might exist. But my desire is to continue to open your eyes to know that those things, they only exist in your mind, right? And until your mind changes, nothing changes around you. So I'm encouraging you to just keep your eyes open and keep an open mind on the things that we see and learn throughout our life. All right. Until next time, man, you guys stay blessed.